Good afternoon.
Good
I always
afternoon.
want to say good afternoon, Ashdown Jones, but we are Ashdown Jones. Good afternoon to you
It's
lot.
good morning, actually.
Oh my goodness, as if we're really early.
Morning.
It's still
Good morning.
morning. It's 3 minutes early, Tilly.
Impressive.
That's impressive, yeah, it is. I would say to her about lunchtime, this is the earliest she's ever been early. So, we're going to talk to you about how we handle this sticky topic of professional advice. And one of the things that we set out to do in Ashdown Jones when we started was to make sure that we were advisors first and estate agents second, because sometimes we have to give somebody really difficult advice. So I've got a friend, Paul. His dad is in his, I want to say, late 80s. And on cue, there's an airplane going past. So that's why we should wait till 12 o'clock. He's probably in his late 80s and he's dabbling with the idea of selling. And because he says the house is too big for him. It's actually not that too big. It's a decent sized 3-bedroom. It's not in this area. And I said to Paul, look, generally speaking, it's probably too late to move on. And I don't mean that in a fatalistic way, but it's quite an upheaval, isn't it, to move house in your late 80s. And if you were going to move house, depending on obviously health and your other situations in your life, there's lots of other things going on. But usually, and he's lost his wife a few years ago, quite a while ago now, and usually it's actually just more, it gives you more security and more peace of mind to stay where you are. And then to wait until, just to get your affairs in order and then let your kids sell the house if they want to do it.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying that it's difficult advice to give, don't sell it. So when he's saying, what's it worth, I'm saying, well, that's not really the challenge, is it? The challenge is, should he be moving at this stage in his life?
Yeah, and also you could question, we've not been asked, you weren't asked for that advice, should you give it?
That's a good question, because actually you gave advice
Just spin that around, didn't you?
in our first year, which was the right advice to give, but it was unsolicited advice.
Unsolicited.
There was a gentleman in a lovely house that wasn't selling, and we were asked in to give our advice. And one of the things that Phil said was,
Well, I come from a household that had no smoke in it, and generally speaking now, I'd say 99% of homes we certainly visit don't have smoke in it. And if I was going to view a house, it would certainly put me off, and in this house there was a very strong smell of smoke, and it had been on the market for quite a long time, and therefore it was probably one of the reasons why it was struggling.
it was a pipe smoker, wasn't it? Do you remember?
Yeah. However, he didn't ask for that advice, and therefore it was probably unwanted and certainly unsolicited.
And he didn't agree with it, so you could just tell he was very resistant to that advice.
Yeah, but I think it goes back as well to as far as the country as a whole, and this is probably more the industry's fault than people outside the industry, probably believe that estate agents are necessarily evil, rather than actually a professional, I hate the word professional, but a professional person that is trained, that understands exactly what they're doing in terms of marketing and advice. They can give you that. They really see you as an access to the market, and I think that's a challenge that we try and overcome and try and change too. That the majority of our clients, and the reason why they choose us, is because we do give them advice that quite often advice they were expecting, advice they didn't necessarily want, although we always wait to be asked for it.
Or suggest that we've got some advice that we'd like to give them and ask their permission.
Yeah, and what we certainly don't do is go in there and say, worth this price, get on the market, it'll sell, and that's it. For the type of homes we see, unique homes, it's very rare. In fact, it's impossible for us to walk in and say, it's worth this price, this is the way to do it, go to market. There's always some play in terms of how it's presented will affect the price, how it's promoted will affect the price, how the target market we look for should be painted, should you change the kitchen. There's always lots of different things that need to go into it to make sure we get the price. And over the first 2 or 3 years, what the comments we always got is that we were the only ones giving advice, and that was a double-edged sword, because we were getting invited into some homes that hadn't sold for 10 years, and some there was good reason for that.
Yeah.
Some not so, and they were the fun ones, I think. Where you could go in, you could instantly see some really straightforward reasons to why it hadn't sold. You'd flip those reasons on the head, and then it'd sell for the same price within a couple of weeks. They were, that's kind of what kicked us off, wasn't it?
It was, because, and I always remember a house I sold in the Cotswolds, I helped sell, and the couple that lived there, it was a beautiful house. It was actually the Old Village Shop, and I think it was called something like the Old Village Shop, which is not a very good name, but anyway, because it still had the kind of window in it, and it overlooked the beautiful green in the middle of the village. It was a really beautiful Cotswold stone home, and when I went in, there was something off about it, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I talked to them for ages about their background and where they come from and everything. Anyway, it transpired they come from London, and that's what it was. I suddenly realised it felt like a London house in the Cotswolds. So it was beautifully decorated, beautiful art, furniture. It was all very, very high quality, but it didn't feel like you were in the middle of the Cotswolds. And once we figured that out and they were on board with it, then we could then look to solving that challenge. But until we'd identified it and they'd allowed me the space to identify what the challenge was, we couldn't solve the challenge. As soon as we did that, we did two things. We changed the interior so it felt more like a Cotswold home, which was only tweaks really. And this is probably another conversation really about exactly how it looked like a London home, but there are certain things that a London townhouse has that a Cotswold cottage doesn't have. And then the other thing we did was change the name of the house. So I think we call it Green View or something instead of the old shop. And those two things made it sell straight away. Now, that they were asking my advice, why hasn't it sold? But when somebody hasn't put their house on the market yet, usually their question is, should I sell now? And that's why we ask loads of questions. In fact, we went to see a house, didn't we? That lady I went to see who was moving to Spain, in Bowness. Her daughter was out there already, and I won't say which house it was, but we were helping her sell, and her brother lived there. Anyway, I asked her what she did for a living, and she said, quite rightly, why is that relevant to selling my house? And there are some reasons that it's relevant, aren't there?
Yeah, a lot of it is to do how we then deliver the information back, which is really important for them to understand. There's lots of different reasons why it's important to us. It's important to find out where you want to be, what your plans are for the next 12 months, what's important to you in an agent. Is it literally the best price you can possibly get and therefore it may take a little longer, or is it the best buyer possible? There's lots of different things, and the reason why this is a topic today is we've been to too many appointments over the last few weeks, and
we've enjoyed each and every one of them, we promise, but it has been a little bit full on.
Yeah, and some of them understand what we do, but don't think it's right for their house, and it probably comes down to a lack of trust in how I presented it, and therefore they didn't believe in the advice. But also, probably, I knew they had 3 or 4 agents before. Other agents probably gave no advice whatsoever, and therefore it was probably a shock to the system for someone to come in to suggest changes. But it's funny because if you get a solicitor, you take their advice, don't you? If you get an architect, you take their advice.
Maybe because our advice is free. Because they're paying for architect advice and they're paying for solicitor advice or accountancy advice. So if you're paying, so you're transacting many thousands, then you're more likely to listen to the answer, aren't you? Whereas we're going out quite speculatively, really, and saying, well, this is what we would do if we were in your shoes.
Yeah, it's flipped on its head. It's almost like if you pay for advice, you're trying to learn off them. Whereas I think a lot of people feel when you invite an agency out, it's almost interview mode, isn't it? You're trying to pick the agent on whatever is important to you.
And I think actually that's a good point, because when we go out and we're one of 3 agents, and they're looking for a valuation and very little else, then they don't see the value in what we do, and therefore they probably won't listen to our advice. Whereas I went to see Michelle's mum the other day, and all she wanted was advice. And she said, yeah, that's absolutely fine, it's exactly what I wanted from you. I probably won't sell at the moment, but I really appreciate the advice you've given me. So that wasn't, we were one of 3, we were going out there as consultants. So it depends how we're invited out, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it takes a certain amount of time to get to market, and our best clients get the best results. Trust in everything that we say and do and propose, and the times where it gets challenging and things don't go as everyone wants it to is when the plan is changed, and sometimes it can go from our advice at the initial meeting, everyone agreeing, to our team going out and that advice or the owner then trying to take charge and changing it slightly, and it always leads to problems down the line.
I think the best start to a meeting is when they are truly interested in what we have to say, and we are truly interested in what they have to say, and that they open up to us so we can open up to them, and that makes for a really good relationship right from the start. Those people who we've understood, so Mike and Louise, for example, where they listened to us and we listened to them, we understood their story and why they weren't selling straight away, and when they were ready to sell, we were the first people that they phoned because they trusted our advice and they trusted what we'd said the first time round, and we didn't hassle them or try and persuade them to go to market. We were just there when they wanted to. When we did go to market, we ended up with several bids of their asking price and over, including a next door neighbour that came and knocked on the door, and so they needed our advice again, saying, what do we do to get past this? We'd put the groundwork in so that they could trust. If I said to them, look, I'm not sure about your neighbour, this buyer is probably the best buyer and these are the reasons why, then they could listen to us and go, actually, they've been straight with us all along and therefore we trust them now. Whereas if you haven't allowed that trust to form with your estate agent, whether it's us or somebody else, you're not really going to trust them when the rubber meets the road, when it really, really counts. When you've got, we've got one at the moment, haven't we, where we've got a house for sale and he's got two bids on the house from two completely separate people, and they make two completely different stories. So one is a staggered bid, one is a bit more straightforward, and it's we're trying to advise him, and because he's listened to us all the way through, he really feels like he can trust our advice. And even if he decides to go against it, we feel comfortable that he's listened and we support him in his decision, whatever that decision is, and hopefully that's what he feels like. But it really starts off at that first meeting, doesn't it? We can normally tell in that first meeting, are they open to our advice, and are we open to listening to them?
I do think you made a good point. If the fee structure totally changed and you paid up front and it was a almost set fee, as architects, potentially are, then there would never be a feeling of that they're trying to get us to do something that we're not totally comfortable with.
Maybe when you pay somebody up front, you are committing to listening to their advice.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what the payment's for. Maybe that's what we should do, just charge.
Charge anyway.
Charge anyway. Like the onlines do. Anyway, that's what we want to say, really. So we're all about advice, and we have lots of advice, and we don't always agree either. Sometimes we sit in front of a couple and then you'll say one thing and like change that kitchen worktop, and I'll go, no, the kitchen worktop's perfect as it is. We had that in a Georgian house, didn't we, in near Staveley Cartmel. Do you remember? I can't remember the name of the house now. Green Sykes. And you didn't like the Georgian blue on the dining room walls. We walked into the dining room and he went,
oh, Newton
Cartmel, and I went, oh, this is lovely, and we had completely different opinions about it. But that's good, because then we can sit in front of the seller and explain our different opinions, and it kind of gives us more credibility with them, that we don't always agree. There isn't always a black and white answer. There's lots and lots of shades of grey that are formed by our own individual and collective experiences.
Yeah, a good example this morning, actually, I was invited round to a place in Cowan Head where there's 2 apartments, and with a couple we know well, and they were going to do 3-bed, but the 3 beds were quite tight, and what they hadn't thought of is that the person buying here is probably going to be a couple, and they only needed a guest room, so therefore having 2 wow bedrooms with amazing master ensuites is a much easier sell and a much more sellable product than a 3-bed, but it's natural to think 3-bed higher price.
Yeah, absolutely it is, yeah. And like I had a call yesterday from somebody we know well to say, how's Burton and Kendal doing at the moment? And normally, 3 years ago I would have said, well, it's kind of like the poor relation to, some of the other villages. Don't hate me on this, but it's not. It doesn't usually have the same pricing in Burton and Kendal. It's a bit like Burnside and Staveley, isn't it? There's usually a differential.
Yeah.
But because of the market at the moment, then actually all the villages around there are all moving up, and you know, you're going to be hard pressed to find anything in any of those villages at a reasonable price for a local. So therefore, it probably will be snapped up. And that kind of advice that people are seeking from us is actually what motivates us to do a good job, because you know, it may or may not ever turn into a fee, and that's fine, because what we're doing is we're building trust in the community, and that is much more important to us. Because then when somebody does really need advice, they'll come to us.
Yeah, we've got into quite a few homes actually that they don't sell the next 2-3 years, and it's just advice. And actually quite often I'll go out to a home and say, why on earth are you selling this?
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make sense.
What did we go out to recently? We told them not to sell. Actually, I told our friend not to sell that boathouse, but he
did anyway.
But he got such a good deal, he sold it anyway. And I went, actually, I think I would have been tempted at that.
Yeah, there was one I went to.
What was the one we went to? We went to and we said, don't sell. Don't sell this, it's an asset to you. Can't remember what it was now.
No, I can't.
But yeah, sometimes our advice is not to sell. Now, that doesn't pay us anything, but it does pay us credibility. And it means that when we say sell now, then they'll listen.
Yeah.
So I suppose the message for you is, because we are rambling a bit now, is if you know somebody, friend, relative, or you yourself just want advice about your house, either whether to change it, improve it, sell it, keep it, rent it, holiday let it, that's why people come to us. And that, you know, our advice is free. So our advice will cost you a cup of tea.
Shouldn't be free, but it is.
But it is. But it's really good advice. So yeah, call us out when you're ready to have a chat completely confidentially, and we'll tell you what we would do in your situation, and then we'll support you through the next steps if that's appropriate. So that's what we're here for. Give us a call.
Yeah, one last thing. That's also the reason why we specialise in unique homes, because going out to a home on an estate in Kendal, which is by the way where I live, so I'm not
dissing estates in Kendal.
There's not much we can add. You know, any agent can go in and say, yeah, it looks great, it's worth this amount, and therefore there's nothing we can really add to the situation apart from agreeing, and it's not really where our expertise are, and therefore
There's
two of us.
expertise is singular.
Expertise is.
Our expertise is.
Our expertise is are.
We'll give you a grammar lesson if you like. I have a question for all of you that are around my age, which is about to change tomorrow. Do you remember the Ready Brett Glow adverts from the 80s? Because I just showed my team it this morning, and Isaac went, geez, look at the quality of that. And that's what TV used to be like.
It's hardly Ultra HD, is it?
Well, actually, it probably looked a lot better at the time on the screen, but you know, it was probably a VCR tape that just.
I always think that in my head, you know, when you see a black and white, I always think, like, imagine you walk around and that's how you see. I can't imagine walking up a street in 19.
There is a famous snooker game where he goes and he's about to pop the blah blah, and then he goes, and for those of you with the black and white TV, it's the one next to the red.
Is he joking?
No.
Oh.
No, but actually, when I was a
You
kid,
can
a
probably
lot of
tell.
people had black and white TVs. My mum and dad had a little portable one they used to take away in the caravan, I think, and then they gave it to me, and I had it next to my bed, and it was a massive thing actually. The screen was that big, and the actual whole TV was like this big, and it made such a noise when you put it on. And the first thing I ever watched on that TV was the election in 1979 when Maggie Thatcher got elected, and it was like 1 a.m. or something, and I was still watching it. I was 11. Anyway, we'll leave you with Ready Brett Glow, Margaret Thatcher, and best advice to sell your house, and we'll see you on next week's Ask AJ.